Welcome back to another episode of Norse Studies with Zakk. We're going over the culture of the Teutons. If you haven't watched any of my episodes, they're in 10-minute intervals. We're just reading this together. Feel free to start at any episode that you've missed. Go back through my page. You can catch up with us. It's pretty easy. We're just going to go through this book together, kind of discern what Wilhelm Grönbeck is trying to say about Norse culture. It was early realized that the two are so closely related as not merely to justify, but to necessitate our treating them together. Such indications as we have of the primeval Germanic customs, laws, and ethical values prove that those earliest forebears of the race were one with their younger kinsmen in mode of thought, and in that which unites thoughts and feelings and makes them the bearers of personality. In this light from the north we can see then that the Suevi and the Macrimani, and whatever they were called, were not mere creatures of the moment, devoid of character, as the Romans fondly imagined. With the aid of the Northmen we can interpret all, or nearly all, the scattered notes that have been handed down, and find something human in what our authorities found meaningless. So what's he saying there? So he's saying that there are clues in the stories and the traditions that are handed down. And even though the authority of history, the people who've written the history books, have said one thing, we can find meaning into what it actually means by studying the culture, studying these spiritual aspirations. We can dimly perceive, for instance, that the alternating fealty and infidelity of Germanic tribes, which so often led the Romans to harsh measures, had in reality its foundation in an ethical system. And we can plainly see that behind their actions, with such vices and virtues, stood a character widely different from the Roman, but neither more natural nor unnatural, in principle just as consistent, just as rational, and no less bound by the consideration of preserving a certain unity in the personality. And a political genius like Caesar recognized that if his plans concerning these barbarians were to be of any firmness in themselves, it was not enough that he thought them out in Latin. His eagerness to penetrate beneath the thought of these Germani, down to the habit of mind which determined their form of utterance, is in itself a testimony to the fact that these barbarians bore the stamp of culture and the mark of character. We are better off than Romans in that we have been guided to a view of the Germanic life from within. The Romans had excellent opportunities of observation and were often keen observers. The great majority of what the Romans and the Greeks wrote about the Germanic people is right in its way. So what he's saying is what the Romans wrote about was correct in a way, but not entirely. But every single remark, great or small, reveals its derivation from a sweeping glance across the frontier. We can always notice that the narrator himself stood far outside. He has seen what these people did, but he has not understood why they did so. Page 8. Their actions show in his account without perspective and without proportion. And the more precise his details are, the stranger seems the whole. Such descriptions leave us, at best, the same grotesque impression one would have on watching from a distance men talking and gesticulating, but without any idea of what affected them. So essentially, let's put this into perspective. You ever walk in on coworkers, family, friends, what have you? You walk in on a couple of them, and they're having a conversation, and you catch a little snippet of it, and all of a sudden you want to jump in and say something, and they look at you like, that's not what we're talking about. That's what he's saying the Romans did. essentially they were able to hear the conversation, but they had no clue what the conversation was. So they were able to see and observe the culture, but they weren't able to describe the logic behind the actions. There's a great difference between making the acquaintance of a people, as the Romans did, outside, following it home to stand without and gain perhaps a glance at its daily life, and on the other hand, being received into the midst of that people, seeing its men at home preparing for a campaign, and being there again to meet them on their return. Excuse me. We are more fortunately situated than the southern writers in this respect, but are we so very much wiser? So he's saying we have the ability, we've got the ability to see what's going on, the information's there, but are we wiser than them? Are we going to be able to grasp the concepts? There may perhaps be some danger of arriving too easily at our understanding. The inability of the Romans to recognize the actions of the Germani as human may warn us against letting our own interpretation pass over what was really strange in our forefathers, erroneously attributing to them motives of our own. So, what he's saying right there is the majority of us in the U.S. were raised Christian, right? So, as Christian followers, we believe things like, if you need something or you need guidance, you get on your knees and you pray for that guidance. You can talk one-on-one with God, right? So a lot of times, people who are raised Christian, let's say they converted to a Norse paganism, a lot of times what they do is they essentially take those Christian beliefs and they just convert the names. So it's still Christianity that they're practicing, but all they've done is change the names. For instance, you'll hear a lot of people talk about praying to the gods, right? So that's attributing the motives that you're used to a religion and culture that didn't necessarily have those things. I'm sure we'll find out in this book certain types of things, but from my knowledge outside of this book, now keep in mind this is outside of this, from my knowledge about the culture, there wasn't a personal relationship between individuals and the various gods. You might align with a certain god, but there wasn't a personal relationship such as there is in Christianity. So a lot of times people will attribute those Christian motives to the ancient culture and they won't understand it. So he's saying, can we be wiser? Can we pull ourselves from what we've learned in our current culture and be wiser about it and look at their culture from their eyes? Let's be better than the Romans. The Northmen are a cultured people in the full sense of the word. We must recognize them as our equals. So essentially, he's saying to understand them, you have to throw out your belief that your religion, your culture is better than theirs. You have to think of them as they are your brother or sister or father or friend, whatever, and try and better understand them. I'm going to stop right there. If you guys want to get something else out of these videos, if you want them to be longer, if you want them to be shorter, please comment below. Rate, comment, subscribe. It helps me out. Otherwise, we'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.